Hello and welcome to this discussion with Aprao, one of our RICS tech partners. I'm Andrew Knight. I work in the standard regulatory and thought leadership part of RICS, heading up all our work in data and tech and leading our RICS tech partner program. And I'm really happy to welcome Daniel Norman from Aprao to join this discussion. So Daniel, it's very much over to you for a bit of an introduction about Aprao, about you and your colleagues, your story, your skills, your experience, and what led to the creation of Aprao.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, Andrew. I'm Daniel Norman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Aprao. What is Aprao? Aprao is a cloud-based financial modeling tool for real estate. So basically, I'll take you back and I'll give you a little bit of background as to where I came from and what led to the creation of Aprao. So for about 10 years before launching Aprao, I worked in development finance. And I was working as a lender in various different capacities. And as part of my role, I was lending money to property developers, and I had those developers coming to me looking to secure that finance. As most people listening to this will know, the process looks a little bit like this. You'll send over an email with a load of different attachments, including a financial model, which is generally an Excel file. You send it to your broker or your relationship manager at a lender. And so there I was on the receiving end, receiving these appraisals, feasibilities every day. And they were coming in all different shapes and sizes. Literally, we would get some where it'd be 3 bullet points saying, GDV, build cost, and site purchase. Can you fund this with a question mark? And then we'd get others that literally I would get a physical pack with a ring binder land on my desk this thick with a fully itemized construction breakdown, phasing, too much information, being totally honest, for what I needed at that point to make a decision. And I realized that whilst everybody is going about everyone's trying to achieve the same thing, but they're going about it in a totally different way. So I realized there was a way and a need to simplify and streamline this process. Not only was it time consuming, but it was also very prone to error because everybody was doing these Excel models, and a lot of people, there's amazing people in the property world who can find great sites or build amazing buildings, but they're not necessarily from a financial background. And so I really saw the opportunity of creating a cloud-based tool to streamline that financial modeling process. And as a result, the initial idea for Aprao was born. So the idea with Aprao is it is a cloud-based tool. So you can create financial models for real estate development, and you can do that from any device. So you can do that on you can do it from an iPad, for example. You're out on site and you want to run a quick land appraisal. How much is this site worth? You can do that from an iPad. You can do it from a laptop, or you can do it, from sat at your desk. It's completely flexible. Any platform that's connected to the internet. And then the other thing with this as well is I realized that because everybody had their own Excel model, nobody trusted the other persons. So basically what you would end up with is a developer running development appraisals, sending it onto a broker or a lender. They would do their own financial model. They would then instruct professionals like valuers, QSs, bank monitoring surveyors, etc. And everybody else would go and do their own financial model because no one trusted the other. So with Aprao, what you can do is a developer can start with a financial model, and they can literally share that by link with everybody involved on the project. And then every single person has a single source of truth to work from without the need to replicate all of this work again and again. And sure, they can still go and model out anything on top of that they want to, but they're not having to do all the manual data entry, taking one spreadsheet here and manually typing figures into another spreadsheet over there. So anyway, that was the idea behind Aprao. We launched the business about 3.5 years ago. We really started the product coming on to 2 years ago in September to the market, and now we have customers internationally from across the UK, Europe, Australia, US, and also Canada. So it's really growing substantially, and business is going very well. And I'm delighted to be having this chat here today with you, Andrew.
That's great. Thanks, Daniel. Now, I know when we've chatted before, I think you're well aware that so much of the RICS membership are actually working in SMEs and sort of micro businesses and as sole practitioners. And clearly they're a huge audience for us in terms of being able to benefit from technology. How does your solution, fit with that particular cohort? Because I say not all our members are working in the big international consultancies in that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is something that we recognize really early on. I mean, the big consultancies, they've got tech and innovation teams, they're scouting for the latest technical, tech and innovation to roll out throughout the business. But there's the long tail, and that is pretty much everybody else who's not working at one of the big names. And there's a lot of people in that space. Globally, there's a lot of people. So whether our customers are developers, lenders, and what we call professionals. So if I could take the professionals category, this is people from RICS, chartered surveyors, for example. We've got anybody providing development consultancy or advice around the development side of things. And so there's so many firms where even from a single person companies all the way up to 10, 20, 30, 50 people companies all across the UK and also internationally who still have a need for technology. They still have a need for that. The way I view it, there's two key points here. The need is to increase efficiency, which is ultimately saving time and saving money, and also minimizing risk. And the more that we can take out of the human manual data entry, the better in terms of minimizing that risk. So creating a more efficient business for these people in a less risky way. And so what we really focus on with Aprao is giving a tool set to people to help manage the workflow and help streamline those processes. The financials sit at the core, and that's really important. So we've got the financial model that without that, our business wouldn't exist. But that is like the center of our product. But around that, we still got the ability for people to track projects and track their workflow, make sure they're keeping track of the deals that they're working on, even storing other information on a project. I was just going to share my screen quickly.
Yeah, thanks.
So just show that quickly. Has this come up for you, Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So here you can see in Aprao, this is what we call our board. Each user's got their own board. It's a place where you can store all of your projects. But we created this workflow management where you can set your own deal stages essentially. So I've got mine set up as new sites to review, sites that are in planning or due diligence, and live deals. And then as a site progresses, you're able to take that through those stages. So we've got surveyors, for example, we've got all of the sites, they call this their inbox, they've got all of the sites that they need to work on. You start with just a site address, but then if you want to dig into that detail, we're able to capture all of the other information apart from the financials as well. So, you can put planning info, you can put links to the planning, you can link to the different drawings or documents. And invite others onto it. And then obviously it goes without saying that we've got the financial modeling that takes place within here. But actually, just having a place to capture all of that information is really important because it's all about creating that efficiency in the processes within the business.
Thanks, Daniel. So what's your view on the kind of the debate about kind of technology replacing sort of valuers and people who do appraisals, or on a more positive note, simply augmenting what they do? Where do you see that shift, and what are the kind of the opportunities for that change as technology can support valuers and people doing these kind of appraisals and managing these kind of projects?
And that's a really good point because there's been a lot of talk around AVM and automated valuations. And as we all know, there is a lot of data, and data is very powerful. But our business still evolves around a physical asset and the built environment, and there's still a physical element to that, whether that is physical inspections or understanding the specific nuances of the market or certain market conditions. And so we don't see the human element being taken away from that. All we see is a strengthening of the human time, or sort of an increase in the efficiency of the use of the human time. So, let's say you're a valuer. Do you want to spend time in Word formatting your reports to to get your pages organized properly just so you can send it off to someone? No, that's an inefficient use of time. So, for example, in Aprao, once you've done the numbers and you're happy with that, you can add your commentary in, you can add sections with headings and other information, and in a press of a button, it will do all of that formatting for you with a nice cover page with the branding of the business, etc. And it will just get that report prepared as a PDF or sharing with the ability to share it as a link, a digital link, and then you're able to not focus, not waste time on those silly things, actually focus on providing professional advice and your opinion. And then the final point with that as well is operating within a framework. So you can operate, and this is particularly important, for Redbook guidelines, but following a process on a like-for-like basis on every single project to make sure that the professional advice that you're giving is obviously consistent, but it also means that that you're not missing anything, you're not negligent in any way, and you're just continuing to operate. Like we introduced a feature a few weeks ago around templates, where we can let users set up templates within Aprao. And I was speaking to a surveyor recently on this, and he said that it's very important because he sets out all of the possible costs and cost categories or groupings of costs which he's likely to see on a development project. And even if that is not relevant to this project that he's providing advice on, he said it's a great prompt for me to make sure I'm not missing anything out. So rather than the emphasis being on somebody to have to type in or add a cost into something, it's actually easier to just remove the things that are not relevant to that project.
Exactly.
And there is a prompt.
I thought that's one good example. I mean, you can think of some other examples where your customers are kind of, to use the jargon, leveraging these productivity gains, because obviously it's freeing up their time, presumably, in terms of efficiency. But is it leaving them able to do some other high value tasks for their customers and do some other kind of services or look at ways their business can evolve?
Well, there's another customer of ours. They're one of the most active users of Aprao, and they do a lot of bank valuation work for development loans. So they're out on the road looking at sites, and put simply, they pretty much always work from mobile devices, so like from iPads, for example. And their team of valuers is out all across the country all day, and right now they're able to do, I don't know the official stats, but they're able, as they tell me, they're able to do many more valuations per day than they could do previously, because previously they would do 1, 2, 3 site visits in a day, maybe. They would have to then go back to the office. They were using a legacy tool previously, which had to be installed on one physical computer in the office. They had to return to the office, do that, the valuations, or do the kind of like the desktop-based work for that day. Whereas now what they do is they use Aprao on the go. They run those headline numbers. They share it with the team because we've got a functionality for team-based sharing. They share it over to the team board, and they've got someone who's based in the office just to add that additional information, provide that additional layer on top of it. So the people with the skills and the knowledge are out doing those physical inspections and driving around and seeing those sites to allow them to create a much more efficient way of working.
Yeah, great. And Daniel, you touched earlier on Redbook. I mean, can you talk us through how you clearly support Redbook IVS within the product? Because clearly, from our members' perspective, it's critical that data and tech goes with the grain of standards. They're working in a commercial environment, they're assuring data, they have standards to follow. Can you bring that alive for us in terms of how Redbook and other standards are reflected in your platform?
Yeah, so I think the key thing here is just having that robust framework to be working with. We've obviously, with my background in banking and our investors and people around our business, we put a lot of effort into making sure that the financial reporting is fully robust within Aprao. And with that, we know that we can have, we've got surveyors doing valuation work on Aprao, knowing that they are working in a robust framework, they're working in a consistent way, and they're able to provide those valuations on that like-for-like basis, which is really important. So from our side of things, we're working with many different surveyors. We're working with the RICS, like yourself, Andrew, on really trying to help get those data standards from a terminology perspective, making sure that when something's called something, it links up and is called something somewhere else, and really trying to really triumph those standards and make sure that people are working in that consistent way. In Aprao as well, you are able to label things as you wish. So we do have this framework, but equally, everybody calls things slightly different things, even within the UK, but also internationally, even though the fundamental item is the same, whatever that may be, that test may be. And so we give the ability for the user to customize that, but knowing that the maths that sit behind it and the financials that sit behind it are robust internationally.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned earlier, obviously, that when you're particularly looking at development, the data set is moving amongst a bunch of stakeholders. Not only the people who are doing the appraisal, but obviously lenders, et cetera. What's the benefit? I suppose it's fairly obvious, but what are the benefits about having a consistent data set? Because you mentioned earlier that people were rekeying and didn't trust the data, were producing their own versions. What's the benefit of having this sort of single source of truth flowing through the process, and what kind of stakeholders are now able to get a hold of this data and understand that they're looking at this single version of the truth?
Yeah, well, when we were doing our research, there's 2 points to this. First of all, from a developer's perspective, because a lot of the time the financials start with the developer looking at sites. And the average developer that we were speaking to in our research phase was looking at 60 sites per one that went ahead and got built. So if you think about this, that's 60 sites which are being appraised, which don't go anywhere, or 59 that don't go anywhere. And so there's a lot of abortive time. So the first thing is there's stakeholders internally. So for those 60 sites, there may be some where you've got a land buyer within the developer or house builder, and they'll say, looking at sites, is this going to stack up? Yes or no, making very quick decisions. So we want to provide a framework and a tool which allows people to do that we do perfectly. So they're making those quick decisions. Then if that's of interest, they share that internally with their stakeholders, where it might be, a finance director, a construction director, or the board, or internal sign off. So then we allow them to share that and invite those people from within the company to view the project information, provide additional information as well, because quite often you start with one person with a headline information, and then we allow the user to break that down. It might involve the construction director to go from a headline £200 a square foot to build to fully itemized, few hundred different line items on the construction phase, on the construction costs. So basically so that's the first part of it. But then the second part is then the involvement of the external stakeholders. So once a project is moving forwards, then it's a case of thinking about, okay, well, who else do we need to share this information with? And that can be anybody. I mean, our research average, I think, with 19 different external stakeholders on each project, not even just accounting kind of like material supplies and that type of thing, but I'm just talking around the financials here. But even like an architect, a development finance broker, the actual lender, an equity investor, a mezzanine finance lender, valuer, QS, all of these people are involved as external stakeholders. So literally being able to share a link to everybody there and everybody to be able to use that data as a single source of truth is an incredibly powerful tool.
That's great. I mean, obviously your platform is enabling that data sharing. I mean, what barriers do you still see in the marketplace about making data flow more easily around? Because clearly your clients are still dependent on other inputs and other data sets to get that full picture. So what's your kind of view of that world of data silos, as I perhaps rather rudely call it?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing here with the data is that most people are very protective over their own data, which is, as you put it, Andrew, that's why we've ended up with data silos. But the smart people in our sector are realizing that actually the value of sharing that data is far greater than the value of just holding on to your small piece of data. So we are seeing a shift in mindset. And even when I was working on the business in the early years, 3-4 years ago, people were very much more guarded about not wanting other people to know anything about what they were doing. But now people understand the benefits of being able to share that data with others. And as always, you can still create a version. And I've worked on the banking side, so I know this happens. But you can create a version that's your set of numbers, knowing for you looking at what's going on in terms of like my best, mid, and worst case scenario, and also what the bank needs to see. And I know this happens all the time. So you can still do that, and you can share different information with different people. As a valuer, you may want to stress test scenarios, and you don't necessarily want to show your workings to everybody. So within Aprao, you're able to create multiple scenarios, but then choose what you share back with people. So I think the key thing is giving people that flexibility, but also being able to, giving people the freedom to share that information, but also giving them the flexibility to choose what they share.
So leading on from that kind of flexibility and empowerment, and I'm probably going to get myself off Bill Gates's Christmas card list if I was ever on it. But do you think the sector too broadly is too reliant on things like Excel? That there's still a hesitation to kind of almost buy into the idea of a platform that not so much puts constraints on people, but does give, it's a word you've used quite a lot, a framework which does say, well, you need to work within a framework, that there's flexibility here, but rather than getting 15,000 different versions of all those projects, as you say, done in individual spreadsheets with different headings and different formats, do you think there's still a challenge here to sort of get people to sort of let go of their Excel a bit more and buy into the concept of hopefully not straitjackets, but frameworks that enable this data sharing? Because arguably sharing Excel, whilst on the face of it is very simple, you end up with lots of different versions of the truth, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the key thing. People feel that sense of kind of freedom with Excel, but the reality is with that freedom comes the opportunity for risk. I'm a great example of this. I had a call with one of our customers. He's an accountant by trade, and he's running a development business now. He created an amazing Excel model. It does everything, covers every business function that they need within their business. And then he would share that with their land buyers and the land team. And the land team would be frustrated because it's this, 10-tab Excel spreadsheet which does everything. And actually, the bit that they need to do is a relatively simple calculation. So they were spending time navigating this very slow Excel spreadsheet, doing all of these calculations. And then what was happening is they were sending it back to the managing director who's got this financial background, and he was being frustrated because they were messing up formulas or changing not using the spreadsheet how it was designed to be used. And so they ended up becoming a customer because he was like, look, I'm not signing up because I don't know how to model I can do that. But he was like, I need a robust tool which the rest of my team can use. And so that is where a real value, one of the key value propositions of Aprao steps in. I thought it's just a good chance to show this, which is our cash flow forecasting tool, which we built into Aprao. So we developed this for land buyers or valuers. Anybody can create a detailed cash flow forecast in minutes. So, I mean, this is a pretty large development. You can update you can spread costs, you can S-curve costs out, you can create multiple phases, you can do whatever you need to do from a cash flow perspective. It's taking care of things like the finance automatically, but also we are able to export that into Excel. So we can button up here in the top right. We still can export that out into Excel because sometimes there's business functions that do want Excel and they've got very bespoke financial modeling requirements, which would be inefficient for a software company like us to build one-off for one customer. So we do still have that ability for you to take the data out, but what it means is that people can work in the same format. So whichever project you're looking at, you can run a cash flow forecast, get the most important, your IRR metrics or your equity IRR metrics, and then you're still able to pull that out to Excel if you've got a requirement to do so.
And I guess the lenders must love that kind of forecast when it comes to managing the drawdowns through the project. So that must be an attraction to them to get that visibility.
Yeah, it's true. And also one of the other things I know from like Redbook perspective, like development finance is often just being assumed as kind of like flat-lined development finance for like purposes. And that's great. But also the feedback we've had from people is actually that it's great to be able to calculate the real impact of development finance on a project.
Yeah.
Because this is actually I wouldn't call it a problem, but it's definitely a consideration where development finance at just assumed flat 100% versus a developer or a development where there might be multiple layers of finance at different interest rates with delays, for example, can have a massive impact on a project. And so our cash flow tool calculates the interest accurately based upon that timescale. So it can actually have a knock-on effect on the residual site value. So our algorithm kind of takes everything into consideration, and you can really understand the impact of timing and also interest cost on that.
Right, yeah, because as you know better than I do, obviously, you'll have tranches of loans over the length of the project that will be at different rates depending on the purpose and their position. So yes, it's an interesting point. I mean, as you know, real estate is usually a debt supported concept, isn't it? So the debt piece is very important, isn't it? It's both from a construction and an operational point of view as well, if you're carrying debt during the occupational phase. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people they don't really understand the full impact of the debt on a project, and just things like IRRs, which is obviously returns taking time into consideration on development projects, is a really important point because you could have two developments both making £1 million worth of profit, just for argument's sake. One takes 3 years to complete, and one takes 1 year to complete. And on a two-dimensional Excel spreadsheet, they both show £1 million worth of profit. Yeah. But the reality is one's going to take you 3 years, one's going to take you 1, and your IRR is going to be drastically different.
Well, and yes, as you say, that we've got to perhaps the market. I'm sure it does understand, but certainly not everybody perhaps gets the idea of net present value and the cost of money in that sense. So yes, it's an interesting and important driver. Well, as ever, it's been fascinating to talk to you, Daniel, and I look forward to our next discussion, talking about these kind of themes and other ways that the industry is being shaped by data and tech. But I'm hoping that the current trajectory is that the industry is becoming more open to digitization and more open to using these kind of platforms. So,
well, that's definitely the direction that we can see things heading in, and I'm just glad it's taken a while for the property sector to catch up with other sectors, but I feel like there is that shift happening now, thanks to obviously innovations in technology, but also groups and associations like RICS being able to open up the conversation about technology and not have it as a bit of a topic that no one really wants to talk about because they're all afraid of losing their jobs, but actually opening up the conversation around how technology can just create a more efficient business.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think I've always been a glass half full person on this. I think it's all about the improvement. So great to talk to you. Look forward to our next conversation. And thanks again for taking the time to talk to us, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.